I think of reading history as like taking a time machine, and I think of writing history like building a time machine. So I thought, geez, I mean, if I were smart, I would have stayed in the 19th century, I would have stayed in the American Renaissance. I don't know. I would have written about a president because there's always a market for presidents. But instead, I thought, well, where would I want to take a time machine to? Where would I want to go if I had a time machine? And I thought, I don't want to be among the Calvinists again and the serious, the Civil War. Let's go someplace fun. Where would I want to go? Well, of course, New York in the Jazz Age. Who wouldn't want to go there? I'd always loved all those, the Algonquin Round Table, F. Scott Fitzgerald, you know, the Flappers, the gangsters, the old movies. And so I was just going through the library at Yale University. I live right near there. That's my home library. And I was in the 20s section, which is why it's always important to have open stacks. I'm a big fan of open stacks. And I just saw this little red book that kind of sticking out. I have no idea why I picked it up. It wasn't notable. Didn't have a fancy cover except for being scarlet red. And it was Polly Adler's memoir called A House is Not a Home. And as you mentioned, it was made into a movie, not a very good movie. You can see it for free on YouTube, and that's about what it's worth. It had poor old Shelley Winters, lovely Shelley Winters, but not a great movie. The early 60s were not a time to be doing movies about prostitution. It was not 1969. But her memoir is great. I mean, it's obviously whitewashed. There's a lot of stuff she cannot say in it, but it is really just fun and fabulous and beautifully written. She happened to have a great ghostwriter who helped her life. And like Henry, she had all these traits that I love. She was open-minded, broad-minded, a person who liked people and liked all kinds of people, who had a great sense of humor about herself, who was whip smart, and knew everybody. Who was like both of them are like Forrest Gump's figures in the places where they are. And so I thought, this is another character. I can use this character to tell a big story that has not been told about American culture. And I think she really does do that, but from a very different angle. I didn't realize how much, I know this sounds idiotic, but I did not realize how much moving from ministers, 19th century ministers, to 1920s madams would be a big difference. Part of it was my mindset. It had taken me so long to understand where the Beechers were coming from that they wanted to be saints, even if they weren't. Whereas all these unrepentant sinners, I know it sounds crazy, but I spent a long time thinking, well, why do people want to cheat on their wives? And I know that sounds like a silly question, but I kept thinking, if you want to get married, you know, because a lot of the men who come to her brothels are married. If you want to be married, why do you want to be running around? That's just going to cause problems. And if you want to run around, why bother to be married? And I was probably 3 years into the project before I thought, the answer is people like to have their cake and eat it too, or eat their cake and have it too, as the saying really goes. Then, of course, people just want to get away with everything. And if you're a man in this period of time, you can get away with a lot. You can get away with a hell of a lot. So that took a while. That was the biggest sort of the mental thing. And then, of course, having to do the actual research. Turns out I did not know as much about commercial sex trade and drugs and alcohol as I thought I did. It's super fun. I mean, it was a really fun book to research. In fact, I probably spent too long researching it because that was the fun part. That's the fun part in general. I think most historians will tell you is the detective work, the following your hunches and like eking out the little trails. Maybe that's why I've been interested now that I'm done on these Agatha Christie's and Sherlock Holmes. Like me, except for live people or murdered people, but live people. So getting to delve into all these characters was both the fun of it and the challenge because, as I say, she's like the Forrest Gump of this period between 1920 and 1945, when New York City is the center of the world, the center of industry and trade and commerce and arts and entertainment. And I know some people know who Milton Berle is, or Frank Sinatra, or Duke Ellington, or Jock Whitney, or Winthrop Rockefeller, but plenty of people kids today, they don't, they don't know who Desi Arnaz is unless, and so that was also part of the challenge was having to, I spent more time recreating the world around Polly than I did with Henry Ward Beecher, even though it was closer in time to our times, even though we have seen a lot more of it in movies and and songs and stuff, it nonetheless required me to say, well, why does it matter that Frank Sinatra is spending time with her? I'll tell you the biggest surprise was I knew a lot of politicians. You gotta, if you want to be that big, uh, like most madams, including your friend who poked people with the pin, maybe she wasn't a madam, but she was a major owner of a bar and grill type of place. You need to have political connections. And that's why so many of these women were powerful, actually. They often catered to politicians and at the same time paid out to them. Same with cops. So I knew that she had these relationships, but I had never heard until midway through, was pretty far along through the book, the research, that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, she claimed, had been one of her customers around the time that he was running for governor. When I was doing that self-help to rewrite my book proposal for the Beecher book, one of the things I stumbled on was an article about how to write pornography. Now, actually, funny enough, in the Polly Adler book, there is no actual sex scene because I didn't have anyone describe it to me. And I didn't have anyone actually, they would describe what it was like to go to one of her parties. Although half the time they mostly would say, it was just an awesome party, but they wouldn't actually say, why, what happened, you had to be there. But they wouldn't, so it's actually not not a very pornographic book, just a very dirty book. But I ran across this article about how to write pornography, and the thing I took away from it was this little exercise, and I would do it all the time. I would still do it, which is how do you because what are books meant to do? A story is meant to take ink and pulp or digital dots on a screen nowadays, I guess. Now I sound old, and make something happen inside the reader. Sometimes it's to make them cry, or to make them laugh, or to make them, move their ideas in some manner. So how do you use inert print to make somebody move something inside them, which of course is what pornography does par excellence. And so this was the rule, and this is how I remember it. You describe first the scene using as many of the senses as you can. Elvira stood there naked, trembling, her teeth chattering so loud they could be heard, in the hallway, her skin, letting off an air of fear. And then you put that person into action. And then then you give them feelings. So Elvira stood there, teeth chattering, naked, and was trembling, was afraid as she was listening out there. Her heart was beating fast as she trembled in fear. So you physically you endow it with as many of the senses as you can. Then you give it a feeling, that what your description, some kind of feeling, so we have something to hold on to mentally, and then you put them into action. Or then you create the desire. She wants something, then something is going to happen to not give her what she wants, as Kurt Vonnegut says. Even if your character just wants a glass of water, make it so that they stub their toe on the way to the sink. And so often, I know that sounds ridiculous, but I would think, what does Elvira look like here? And I would start that way more often than not, and especially if you could put it in the view of some other character. So if I had a character standing there saying, well, Polly was tiny, you would never have known until she talked, and then her voice had the roar of a longshoreman. And if I have somebody quoting that way or describing it that way, even better, because now the reader can see it through their eyes. It's like you always want to give them, if you've read, everyone I'm sure has read The Great Gatsby. One of the reasons The Great Gatsby is so great is not just that you're reading his beautiful prose and you're seeing the character of Gatsby so vividly, but you're hearing Nick Carraway's thoughts. And now I can't do that because I'm a historian, but I can try to create Nick Carraway's along the way, if that makes sense. So I've been reading historical fiction, and I've just been trying to read more fiction in general, and it's different, man. Making things up in your own head seems so much harder. At least as a historian or as a journalist, you have ideas, you have things to bounce off of. You are not just reliant on just your imagination. And I'm not sure that that is also, boy, fiction is a hard world. I've started to pay more attention to the publishing world because usually I'm the current publishing world, not the publishing world of 1926, which was, that, and I see, somebody pointed out, I don't know, there's something like 125,000 books come out every year in English and well over 1 million every year across the world. So I've been really having something of an identity crisis in general, that am I doing this because I want attention? I want people to pay attention to what I have to think and what I say, or am I doing this because I just love this and I can't think of doing anything else? And mostly what I have been doing is watching Netflix and reading Agatha Christie. So I haven't decided yet.